This episode of the Beauté Industry Podcast was brought to you by Advanced Nutrition Program Australia. Your future skin starts from within. Hello and welcome to the Beauté Industry Podcast, your online support community for the professional beauty industry. I am your host, founding director of Beauté Industry, Tamara Reid. Here, we are closing the competitive gap and speaking your language. This is a platform created and dedicated to the professional beauty industry, valuing community over competition. We serve to help connect you with inspiration from industry experts, expand your knowledge through educational pieces, and bring you the latest in product and technology innovation. This is Beauté Industry. Today, my guest is David Alpert from Advanced Nutrition Program. David has over 30 years' experience in the professional skincare industry and pioneered the launch of Advanced Nutrition Program in 2006. Additionally, he is a passionate marine photographer and advocate for more sustainable business practice in the professional aesthetic industry. Appalled by the evidential damage to the marine ecosystem, David took the decision to rebrand the Advanced Nutrition Program range and introduce 100% environmentally friendly, recycled and recyclable paper-based packaging in 2017, a pioneering approach at the time. In today's conversation, you'll hear why David insists on plant-based, full traceability of ingredients, purified fish oils, and heavily invests in building a sophisticated, climate-controlled packaging environment to ensure the highest quality control of products within the range. Beyond work in his own company, David is doing the good work with the UK parliamentary group to raise awareness and promote change in the beauty industry. A fascinating conversation today, which I think you'll enjoy. From Advanced Nutrition Program, today we welcome David Alpert. David, welcome to the Beauté Industry Podcast.
And good morning, Tamara. Thank you very much. Well, I should say good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, thank you so much. It's evening for me, morning for you. So I really appreciate you waking up so early to start your day for us.
No, it's fantastic. It's great to be here, and I admire the work that you're doing. So it's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you. The feeling is very mutual with what you're doing. Before we get into all of that, we ask our guests to travel all the way back in time and to figure out how they entered into the beauty industry and the aesthetic industry, because it's never that linear pathway of I wanted to go to A and here I am at Z. We have to go through the entire alphabet to find out what we actually want to do and what drives our purpose. So I'd love to start with you there today.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting question, because I guess it's very much the case for myself and Tracy, my wife, who started a business with me. I did my honors in finance, so I certainly didn't ever imagine that this is where we would be ending up. But at the time we were living in South Africa, as you could probably pick up from my accent, there was we just finished university. And in those days, there was still a draft for the South African Army, which I didn't wish to attend. So we had to leave the country, and it was a very strange time, and making decisions like that as young people. But we left, and we came to live in the UK, basically, or I guess really, it was sort of penniless students. Tracy had connected with a brand called Enviro, which I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with, and she'd arranged with them to distribute Enviro. I started another business, which was quite successful. I sold it. I worked with the people I sold it for 4 years, and then in 1999, after we'd had our first child, Tracy was still working in the business, in the cosmetic business. I was at a crossroads to decide what it was I wanted to do with my life. I felt that sort of the world was my oyster. What could I do? What should I do? And the one thing I had noticed that in the sort of fledgling business that Tracy had created, was the fantastic feedback she was getting for the skincare that she was distributing and the differences she was making to people's lives. And that appealed to me. I'd come from an industry where it was very much pile them high, sell them cheap. And the actual idea of building something of more substance, where you make a difference to people's lives, where you make real changes that is based on real science and efficacy rather than, another business regime, then that's what appealed. And so I decided to, with a 3-month-old baby, join Tracy in a little room that was about the size of my office today, that had all our stuff in it. And we had one employee in those days, and she's still here. She's still my PA. I think you may have dealt with her, Lorraine. Mm-hmm. And she still keeps me on the straight and narrow. And that's how we started, literally absolutely from nothing. And I'm very proud to say today we were the 3rd biggest company in the professional beauty industry in the UK. And enjoying our time, really.
Wow, how incredible. So starting off in finance, obviously you said there that you saw Tracy's passion there and the passion for her clients and the feedback that they were getting. What transferred to you? Because I'm sure if I talk to my husband about before and afters and, the fantastic feedback that my clients are getting, I don't think he would throw in the towel and want to join me in business. So what was that special moment for you?
So I suppose really I have a passion for science. Although I studied business at university, if I were to have endless hours, I would tell you as a kid growing up, we started my own laboratory at home. I won the biology prize at school. It was something that I was very much interested in, and looking and listening to the science behind the product, and the person who developed it, Dr. Des Fernandez. There was a definite appeal, and actually many of the sort of values that we hold dear at the International Institute for Anti-Aging today, which is the company that owns the Advanced Nutrition Program, were embedded in those early days by Dr. Fernandez in terms of looking at the science, looking at what makes real changes, looking at how you deliver efficacy, and not necessarily following the hype. And all those sorts of principles really appealed. But it was never a light bulb moment, as you correctly pointed out. It was a journey. And so this is a journey that started, 3 decades ago, frankly, and one that we've been going along ever since.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And so did your interest in nutrition begin in the same way, or how did that come about, that timeline?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, because it wasn't an obvious link. The International Institute for Anti-Aging actually started off life as a educational business that was allied to Tracy's business. They were 2 separate companies in those days, and we used to hold really groundbreaking seminars at places like the Royal Society of Medicine in London. And I used to spend a lot of time in those days traveling around the world to anti-aging conferences, listening to the latest thinking on anti-aging. And I tell you what, it was quite challenging, because you'd be sitting in a hall full of 3,000 people in Las Vegas. It'd be the equivalent of like 2 o'clock in the morning for you. And you'd have these doctors. The thing about anti-aging is it doesn't start and stop with the skin. It deals with every aspect of the body. So you have these doctors giving incredibly complex lectures to someone who had no medical training. And I tell you, it was quite challenging to keep up. But anyway, it was interesting. And there were certainly some standout figures. And what we used to do is we'd bring those people back to the UK, and we'd host conferences at the Royal Society. And we attracted a certain type of therapist who really was interested in efficacy and delivering results for their clients. But what soon became clear when it came to skincare, or anti-aging in general, is that what you put in your mouth is very, very important. And and that nutrition plays a fundamental role in successful aging. And although that became clear, and what also became clear was that there wasn't anyone doing the type of work that we intended and are doing today in terms of research, and therefore we needed to break into that space, not from a business point of view, but just because it was an unanswered question when it came to anti-aging. So that was the sort of driving passion behind it. But I can honestly say, hand on heart today, that when we started that aspect of the business, when we started the advanced nutrition program, we had no idea that we would be able to deliver the sorts of results that we're delivering today. So it's been, as I say, it's a theme that's probably going to run through this podcast. It was a journey, and it started off with the realization that nutrition played a role, and it's developed into a more of an understanding that actually, if you aren't using nutrition as part of your skincare regime, you're only doing half the job. And frankly, if from what we can see today, if you were given the choice of only one thing, you could either do topical skincare or oral. I would probably do oral. The changes that we are seeing from oral skincare today, we've never seen with just topical. Of course, the benefit that we see today is that if you combine the two, then you as a therapist can deliver such fantastic results. And it's a very, very exciting time to be a therapist in that industry, because our whole mission at the International Institute every day is to empower therapists to deliver results. And I believe that therapists have never had the tools to deliver the sorts of results that they can today. So it's an exciting time. And I feel that we have a very enthused and passionate team because of the results that we are achieving.
Yeah, I've actually never heard the word oral skincare before. And I think that really encapsulates everything that you're talking about in terms of advanced nutrition program, but also in terms of it's a real it's a word that's very practical for clients to understand rather than talking about the word supplementation or internal nutrition. I really like that kind of phrase, oral skincare, because that's exactly what it is. It's skincare that you're putting in your mouth.
Yeah, so we have a research center here, and we spent an inordinate amount of time researching products and looking at efficacy. So it literally is about oral skincare, because we measure umpteen parameters of the skin, and unless we see significant changes, we won't release a product onto the market. So it's very much about delivering oral skincare.
Yeah. I think nowadays in 2020 and 2021, oral skincare and supplementation and whole food powders and things like that are very trendy, and we all know about it now. However, you launched Advanced Nutrition Program in 2006. So you obviously had the foresight that this was actually going to, not be a trend, and it was going to stick around. How did you predict that was going to happen? I mean, I don't like to put it down to luck or anything like that, because obviously there's so much hard work behind it. But how did you know that this was going to work?
So, for someone who has studied finance,
Yeah.
the basis of their career, what I'm about to tell you now, probably not, something to be proud of. But it wasn't driven as an economic decision, and it wasn't driven as a business decision. It was driven as an unanswered question in the pursuit of successful aging. And, especially those of you listening and who started businesses will know, especially in the early days, I mean, there was definitely no economic merit in what we were doing. I mean, it's different today. We're a sizable company. We've got hundreds of people that work as part of the Institute. Sorry, I should say 150 rather than hundreds.
Yeah.
But in the early days, it wasn't driven by any sort of business acumen or foresight. It was we've got unanswered questions here, and can we find the answers?
Yeah, very impressive. Sometimes we just have a hunch, don't we? And I think if we find a gap and if we see that something is needed, then I feel like the masses will come. And clearly that has happened because you guys have just launched in your 20th country. So first of all, congratulations. We feel very privileged over here in Australia to have the product. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, look, firstly, I'm very proud to be working with Margie Fox Distributors. I've known Margie for the better part of 3 decades. We distribute Environ in the UK, as I mentioned, and I know she does out in Australia. So that's how we originally met. And you know, I'm excited to work with her because I know Margie's passion, dedication, and hard work. But also, more than anything else, what's important to me is integrity. And I know she runs a business with integrity. Sadly, in our industry, so often we get a lot of hype over substance, and Margie's not one of those people. So really excited to work with her and her team, and I can see that they're a passionate team that she's built there. And it's great to be in Australia. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to get there. But one of the things that's very important to us is dotting all the I's and crossing the T's when it comes to regulatory issues. And there's a tough regulatory environment that needs to be complied with. So it's taken a little while, but we're there. I'm very excited to be part of what you guys are doing. We're very jealous of your business environment in Australia. They're still operating, unlike us in the UK. Very sadly, the COVID restrictions are quite locked down, frankly, at the moment.
Hopefully you guys can come out of the lockdown ASAP. I'm crossing my fingers for you. Look, I'd love to chat a little bit more about the plant-based side of Advanced Nutrition Possible, because from what I understand, you pretty much insist on using that plant-based formula as much as possible. And talking about the environment, I'm wondering how you ensure consistent quality when working with plants, which are so heavily influenced by the climate because of us humans are constantly impacting it. And you mentioned there, the difference in environment in the UK compared to Australia. I mean, it's such a volatile kind of ecosystem that we live in. How do you ensure that consistency?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our ingredients are plant-based, but I should say that essentially, again, we're looking at an end goal. So we're looking at, well, what will drive the efficacy, and so that's the primary determinant of the ingredient that goes in, rather than necessarily aiming at plant-based. So in particular, for example, if we're utilizing, let's say, vitamins, a lot of those will be synthesized rather than grown as plants. But there will be nature identical molecules, and the stability of them as a result of being synthesized, rather than sort of taking the orange and squeezing it to try and get vitamin C type of thing, much greater. But that aside, it's an interesting question. And let me tell you a little story, which will probably answer it. When we very, very first started, one of our first production runs, it was a vitamin A supplement, and we do a lot of testing as a company, which I'm sure we can talk about a bit more. But one of the things that we did was, post-production, we tested the product, which, as basic as that might sound, is actually not a very usual thing to do in our industry. So we tested the product and checked that it had the right amount of vitamin A in it, and it only had a fraction of what was supposed to be there. And so we took it up to the manufacturer, and to cut a long story short, essentially it wasn't the manufacturer's fault, but the actual ingredient only contained a fraction of the vitamin A that should have. It wasn't even the form of vitamin A it was supposed to be. And so we learned a lesson very, very early on, not to trust anything at face value, to very carefully choose our ingredient suppliers. And so what we do is we test and we retest. In fact, with every batch of product, if you're taking one of our products, that product batch has gone through over 400 tests from start to finish, of a minimum of 400 tests from start to finish in our production process. where we use, for example, something called HPLC testing, which will actually look at the molecules and see is that vitamin A, or is that, is that plant organic that we intend to be there, and the end product actually there. And so yeah, that's how we do it. We just we spend the money, and there'll be a price difference between us and other supplements. And I'm a very firm believer that in this world you get what you pay for, really. And there's a reason why some supplements are very, very inexpensive.
Yeah, well, coming back to that word integrity, you could easily not go through 400 tests per product or per ingredient, couldn't you? And that would definitely bring the price down. But then you wouldn't have those ethics behind the product, and you wouldn't be able to know that what you're doing is 100% ethical.
Sure. So ethics, very important side to it, but efficacy is probably our primary driver. And what we want to make sure is when somebody takes our product, they get the results. And there's only one way to ensure that, and that is we need to make sure that it's got the ingredients in, and the ingredients are active, and they're going to deliver the result. So that's the primary driver. But I mean, ethics, and well, we can talk quite a lot about that, because as a company, I think we hold up some ideals that maybe set us apart from others.
Very interesting. So speaking of efficacy, some of your products do contain omega-3s, which I'd love to unpack with you today, because you've got a Friend of the Sea partnership, which I really, really love. Can you share what this means when it comes to actually being cruelty-free and sustainable?
So I suppose we need to just rewind a little bit and tell you a little bit more about myself. And Tracy, when we were students at university, Tracy started an organization called Action for Animals. And, it was a very politically charged environment. So actually getting even like animal welfare onto the agenda was difficult. It's quite understandable in hindsight, but it was difficult. So it's not a bandwagon that, a lot of people and companies have jumped onto more recently. It's something that really goes right to our core, back to our student days. And what we, so that over the years has developed. I have as a hobby marine or underwater photography. Fortunate enough to feature quite prominently in that arena. And I like to use my photography advocacy for marine environment protection. When you sail 100 or 200 nautical miles away from a coast, you suddenly leave that country's jurisdiction, and you get into a very, very murky area when it comes to the law and what goes on there, because you then get into international waters. If any crimes take place there, it's very, very difficult to know who's going to prosecute those crimes, and so on and so forth. And so sadly, when it comes to the marine environment, we see a massive amount of exploitation and frankly destruction of the marine environment. And I can tell you horror stories from what I see when we live fairly sanitized life living in cities. You get out into the rest of into the wild, so to speak. You'd be amazed at what you see, and it's not great. And really the levels of destruction over the last couple of decades have just accelerated off the charts. So sustainability actually is a very, very important and possibly overused word, because we are heading for a cliff edge in terms of sustainability. And if we don't change our practices, then unfortunately we're going to see the collapse of many ecosystems, and potentially even life on Earth, not to put too blunt a point on it. So it's an important thing that needs a lot of focus and a lot of attention. So being Friends of the Sea, using their certification on our products is just really the tip of an iceberg of a philosophy that we like to adopt in terms of sustainability. And it just means that we're working with registered fishermen who are working in fisheries that are monitored. where they can ensure that the sustainable, they catches the sustainable and so on. But it's a much bigger picture that needs looking at. That we as an organisation, myself particularly, an advocate of sustainability. One of my trips up into the Arctic to photograph up there, I came across, and I took my family with me on that occasion, and we were on this expedition vessel with some Thai scientists who were looking at plastic pollution in the marine environment. And we came across this mother and two cubs, polar bears, a polar bear mother and two cubs. And it was such a special moment. It was fantastic. I mean, just seeing them in the wilds, and it was absolutely beautiful. What I didn't realize, not being a biologist, is just what a poor state they were in. And I had the opportunity later on to put my photographs in front of the world's leading expert on polar bears, and he turned around to me and said, "Sadly, David, these polar bears wouldn't have made the next ice season. When did you get these photographs?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, chances are they're already dead." And that was like a stab in the heart to me, because you share a very special moment with your family when you see animals like that out in the wild, and suddenly you realize that they didn't make it. And they didn't make it because of the situation that we see today in terms of global warming and their inability to hunt and still feed themselves. So this is what you see when you're out there. And we're quite passionate about that sort of thing. We've started a foundation to give money to people like Wild Aid for education. And we're on a mission through the work that we do to get our therapists to be conduits for change. Because if you think about it, we supply thousands of salons, and those thousands of salons have thousands of customers, or hundreds of thousands of customers if you aggregate them all up. And we can't wait for government. We can't wait for business to change. There's very little incentive for business to change, because of course it hits the bottom line. So when I've been invited to speak on various forums in the UK stages and things like that, and the other business owners that are out there, or business people from big public companies, and you listen to them essentially doing what we call greenwashing, where they talk about change, but the change isn't meaningful and the change is not substantive. And if we could turn the situation around, whereby we start to operate on a sustainable basis, the change that is required is quite deep-rooted. And that's a big part of kind of what gets us going over here. So efficacy is obviously the primary aim, but we want to do it in a sustainable way. And it's a big part of us at the Advanced Nutrition Program.
After the break, David shares the moment he decided enough was enough and made the switch from recycled and recyclable packaging. But first, a little bit more about the product that is Advanced Nutrition Program. Community, you can help your clients feed their skin internally with the nutrients it needs for optimal skin health. As you can probably tell, Advanced Nutrition Program is the ultimate in anti-aging oral skincare and is now available in convenient daily pods and are sustainably packed in full recyclable vegetable ink packaging. Omega-3, omega-6, retinol palmitate, biotin and lycopene are just some of the high-performing ingredients found in Advanced Nutrition Program that work in synergy to bring out yours and your clients' inner glow. Advanced Nutrition Program have kindly offered all of our listeners of today's episode to receive a complimentary trial for all inquiries made in the month of March 2021. Simply head to www.info.margiefox.com.au/ANP Butate Podcast, or click through the show notes of this episode to find out more. Thank you so much to the team at Margie Fox for making this episode of the Butate Industry Podcast possible. And now, back to David. I can hear how passionate you are about sustainability. I don't know if you have a program that we have. It's called War on Waste. And there was one episode, or a series of episodes actually, and it was just on the straw, a plastic straw, and just how much damage plastic straws are doing to polar bears and the marine life, and the turtles and things like that. And you think that's one tiny item, a straw, and how much of an impact that is making, let alone now we're talking about face masks, and we're talking about the plastic rings off, the top of a six pack, for example. I mean, when you had that experience, obviously something was unsettling for you, and it made you have a shift in your perspective. What kind of changes did you bring back into the business after having that experience?
Yeah. So if I can just pick up on the point you made with the straws, that I certainly pre-COVID used to travel quite far and wide in marine environments. I must tell you, when we were in the Arctic, we got up as far as less than 10 degrees from the North Pole, so we were pretty remote. I mean, you just no other people life, or life was human life. And I can tell you that where you had little islands and things like that, the shores and everything were just full of plastic.
Truly.
It was amazing. In fact, I brought back soft drink bottles and all shampoo bottles for brands that you're very, very familiar with. And I can tell you there were no straws or cotton earbuds, and that's the whole straw thing. In terms of we're gonna fight plastic and ban straws and things like that, for me was a big part of greenwashing. Because if we're going to make any substantive change and have an actual impact on the environment, I mean, we got to go way, way beyond that. So those sorts of things. We have at the International Institute, we have something called the drop test, and the drop test it's actually a little bit tongue-in-cheek, the drop test, because we brought in experts over the years to talk to us about sustainable packaging. And they start tying you up in ever-decreasing circles until you disappear down a black hole, because one council can process one type of packaging, and another council can process another type of packaging, and then when you start exporting and going to different countries, and eventually there's no common ground basically for doing anything on a sustainable basis. So we said, we'll sod all of that. What we'll do is, let's assume that this packaging drops in a forest or drops in the sea. Is it going to create a problem, or isn't it? Is it going to sit for thousands of years and not degrade? What's going to happen to it? And that's what we call our drop test. And so when we produce packaging, again, we were totally groundbreaking. Myself and our head of ops went off to all sorts of strange packaging fairs and things in Europe and all over the show. And we sort of cobbled together stuff in the early days. And actually, the producers, because of our volumes, have actually not properly produced them. But people who are familiar with our products will know that our pots are made out of cardboard with a metal base. That'll just basically degrade in water and disintegrate over a relatively short period of time. And we're on a mission to move away entirely from plastic. It is difficult, especially when you're producing foods, because we want something that degrades, but doesn't degrade while it's sitting on the shelf of the retailer, and it still needs to protect the product. And of course, efficacy being our main driver, we need to protect the efficacy of the product. So it comes with its challenges, but it is a big part of what we do. And if we look at our R&D pipeline, we've got amazing new packaging technologies in the pipeline, where we are working with some very, very innovative graduates, and it's an exciting area for us. But what amazes me is that we as a little privately owned company seem to be leading the space. And I can tell you why with confidence we're leading the space is because we've been able to get patents on the stuff that we're doing. So we know we're doing stuff that no one else is doing anywhere in the world. So yeah, it's unfortunately, we work in an industry that is very, very, very polluting from So ingredient production right through to its disposal of its waste in its containers. And amazingly, it's flown totally underneath the radar, because if one thinks of industries that are polluting, we think of the sort of gas and petrochemical industries. We think more recently people have started realizing and highlighting the waste and destruction of the food industry. The clothing industry has come under fire. The beauty industry in the UK is, when I say the beauty, the personal care industry is almost a similar size to the clothing industry, and yet it's flown totally underneath the radar.
Yeah.
And has come under very little fire, despite the fact that we produce billions, and it's many billions, of non-recyclable packaging each year as an industry. So there's an enormous amount of scope for change, and that change is coming very, very slowly at the moment. So this is why we invite our therapists to become conduits of change with their clients, and talk and try and work through some of this change, so we can change the psyche and try and deliver a better result for our world and our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's more than, it's more than seeing a packaging and believing everything that people say at face value. It really is about doing your due diligence and then passing along that conversation to clients, because there are so many things like gloves and needles and consumables and cotton rounds and earbuds and all of these different things, which we often don't think about in the treatment room until we've used them and we take the bin out and think, how could we possibly go through this many consumables? And I'm sure business owners who are paying for the consumables are sitting there listening, nodding their head going, yes, I know how much I spend on consumables. But it's all about that conversation that we've got to pass on to the client, so then they don't go stocking up on all of those consumables in their own routines as well. So it's kind of like that old saying, the fish rots from the head. We need to start with the companies like yourself who are pioneering the way through, and then you guys having the conversation to the clinics having conversation to the clients. That's where that importance lies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So talking about then the production process, I'd love to pick up on something that you talked about before, which was the rigorous testing that you do. I know somebody's going to ask me this, hence why I'm asking. Why exactly are you testing so many times? What exactly are you looking for during that process?
So the testing process, I mean, it comes down, again, our primary goal is to achieve efficacy. But in order to do that, we need to test before, during, and after production. So before, to make sure that the ingredients we're working with don't contain things like heavy metals, any sorts of contaminants, any sorts of bacteria that are going to be unkind to the user. Of course, bacteria got a bad rap. Bacteria is a very, very important part of what we do. So we can talk about that as well. But so we test before, during, and after. So during, for example, I'll give you an example. Maybe we'll bring this to light. So when we mix our product, we do something that's not necessarily common. In fact, I think it's quite uncommon in our industry, because we often get looked at rather strangely when we insist on these sorts of things at facilities where we produce. And so when you mix up the ingredients, it can be actually difficult to get a consistent mix. And so the drug industry, because when they feed you a pill, you need to know that not all the active is in just one part of the batch. Or use a method whereby they take a sample from the top of the mixture, from the middle, and from the bottom.
Right.
They send it off for analysis, and they make sure that you've got an even mixture of the ingredients in your mix. Now, we apply that same principle to the way we produce, so that if you're taking a vitamin A pill from us, and in pot number 1 it hasn't got all the vitamin A, and pot number 156 it's got very little. And so those sorts of things, what they do is they slow down production enormously, because you have to take the product off the line while it's being tested. And then, and equally, there's the cost of the testing, and we spend a lot of money on testing. So it adds to the price of the product, but at the end of the day, I don't see a way around it. And then, of course, post-production, we want to make sure that what we've got in there is what we expect. And then we check for stability. And so we hold on to our products all the way through to the end of their shelf life. So it can be for a couple of years. And we continually test to make sure that they are stable, and that you are getting the active ingredients that you are expecting. And so that's why, those are the sorts of things that we tested for. And it's one of those things that if you want to deliver an effective product, you've got to make sure that it's active.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess why I ask that question is because sometimes, as therapists, when we're talking to clients, having conversations about different brands and different products, we can rattle off things like, oh, advanced nutrition program, test their things, but, test their product before, during, and after. And a client will say, okay, so what does that actually mean? And then sometimes the therapist can stand there like a deer in headlights going, oh, actually, I never asked that further question.
Yeah.
So, conversation and that articulation is very important. And I'm interested to hear from you with regards to therapists and estheticians actually approaching the conversation of nutrition with their clients. How do you suggest one does that and introduces that conversation? Because sometimes it can be, a little bit daunting to bring up nutrition or a client's lifestyle with them during a consultation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we learned that lesson the hard way in the early days, because we wanted, as the International Institute for Anti-Aging, therapists to talk to clients about all the benefits of this nutrition we convey on them, which would extend far beyond the skin. Of course, that took therapists totally outside of their comfort zone. And so it was a problem, and we found that as a result, they weren't having the conversation. So really, we know through a lot of the research that has been published that the products that we are supplying convey enormous benefits to heart health, brain health, all sorts of things. We don't touch that at all. So in our training, all we do is talk to the therapist about skincare. We want them to talk to their clients about skincare, because that's what the client's there for. That's what the therapist knows and understands. And frankly, when we invent new products and put them through clinical trials, and sometimes it can take as long as 4 years for us to bring a product to market. I mean, that's unheard of in our sort of industry, which is frankly a machine for launching new products. So we do a rigorous amount of clinical trials ourselves before we prepare to put a product on the market. But when we do put the product on the market, we like to arm the therapist with all the information that they need in order to have the conversation with the client. But there's actually a very, very simple cut through from what I just said. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. That oral skincare now is being well understood to deliver results. And if you aren't using oral skincare, you're only doing half the job. So if you, as a therapist, have your client's best interests at heart and you want to deliver the best result for your client, then there's no need for any therapist to ever sell any of our products. Because what we do in our training is we'd like to teach them how to prescribe. So I am the professional in the room, and you come to me with the skincare concern, and I'm, in my professional opinion, I'm going to prescribe the products for you that I feel are going to deliver the results. We go a step further again in the UK because we do a lot of photographic evidence, and so we actually like to prove to the people or show them actually the results we do. But that's a different story. But so as a skincare professional, I'm going to it's basically a mind shift, but it's a dual recommendation. So this is your skincare from the inside, and this is the skincare that I recommend for you from the outside. And the combination of those two is what's going to deliver the outcome that you've come to me today to see. And I look forward to seeing you again in 4 week's time, and we can review things. And so you talk, we talk to them as a doctor or a professional would talk to a client or a patient. We do not advocate giving somebody a sample and saying, try this and see how you get on. I mean, that is a barrier to sales. That doesn't help sales.
Yeah.
And so, and especially with oral skincare, you're not going to see one result after taking a couple of pills. So the thing is, that's the approach that we like to teach, and it's been very effective in the markets where we've introduced the products.
Fantastic. And I guess just to simplify it even more, as you said, if you're talking to a client about an antioxidant serum, which is going to fight free radical damage, it's going to stabilize the cell, do X, Y, and Z for the client's skin concern, well, then your internal antioxidant is going to do the exact same thing on the inside. So you're having that dual approach. So you can relate that to anything. You can relate it to a cleanser, which is going to clean the skin, or a cleansing product internally, which is going to clean the skin from the inside out. So realistically, if we're talking about a topical product, then we should be talking about the relation product with that oral skincare at the same time. And I really like what you said there about giving somebody a sample of the product, because it's almost as if you're going to give them one orange and say, okay, let me know if your skin's brighter after having this one orange because it's got 100% vitamin C in it. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So the client does need to come on board and almost join the party and trust in that therapist. But I guess the therapist has to have the tools and the articulation in the first place to make that transaction. What does the advanced nutrition program look like at home for a client? Because as you said there, it is a pill, which is quite unique in itself.
So actually, Tamara, if I can just talk to the point that you made. So it's quite interesting because two things. Firstly, when one talks about orange, I mean, one of the biggest objections that clients have, is that they say, I eat a well-balanced diet. And so what do I need to take the supplements for? And actually, this is very, very interesting because UK government, for example, measures the quality of umpteen number of foodstuffs ever so often, and they publish those reports. And I have to say they're absolutely eye-watering, because if we look at the food that our parents or grandparents, post-war grandparents ate, compared to the food that we eat now through industrialized farming methods, I mean, and when I say they publish the quality of it, they do this analysis and they'll look at how much zinc, how much selenium, how much vitamin A or C or B or whatever the food is, and they'll give you the full breakdown of each food. And we could just see that just a massive trend down, so that our food that we are eating today is massively nutrient deprived because of the production methods. I can give you a whole podcast on why that happens, but let's not go there today. So that's the one thing that I just want to talk to you about in terms of, so that's an important, sadly, if you were enormously disciplined and perhaps you had a chef and they made the most fantastic meals for you morning and night, and food was still nutrient rich, maybe you wouldn't need what we have, but that's not the way we live today. And secondly, just to talk to a point that you made, that you remind me actually of a study which was a very early pointer in the direction. That it was a study at the British Journal of Nutrition, and that study said that oral skincare is actually better than topical skincare, because, as going back to your antioxidant point, it's working from the outside but also working from the inside. Because firstly, it bathes all the cells in your body, all your skin cells in the body, not just where you're applying your creams. Okay, so if you've got rough elbows and things or whatever, and you're not maybe only applying face cream, it's obvious. And secondly, it bathes those cells in those important nutrients 24 hours a day. And thirdly, it gets to the very deepest layers of the skin, which any therapist will know is actually probably one of the biggest challenges, is getting your active molecules through and that penetrate into your skin. So those are so from those points of view, oral skincare can offer benefits that topical skincare can't. Typically, people always do what they've always done, and they are in the kind of habit of using topical skincare. And there are certainly brands, we've discussed one in particular today, that can deliver results. And so I wouldn't advocate ever stopping that, but certainly the use of oral in combination with topical will deliver results to people, and that will possibly quite astound them.
Interesting.
Sorry, then you asked a question which I've gone totally off the topic now.
No, I love it. It's fascinating, very fascinating. So in conjunction with a client, trying to eat as much fresh fruit and whole foods as possible, how does Advanced Nutrition Program work in their home care routine?
Yeah, okay, so right. So we have what we call our daily basics, which are we know what makes healthy skin. And the interesting thing in terms of the industry we work in, the hype and journalists and these sorts of things, always trying to look for that new angle. I mean, the reality of it is that we know the receptors that need to be activated in order to stimulate collagen, to stimulate elastin, to repair DNA, and so on and so forth. So you could put all sorts of fancy things like chocolate and caviar and things on your skin, but sadly, they're not going to stimulate those receptors. So a basic skincare regime, you want lots of vitamin A and vitamin D, actually, interestingly. And we do some work with a doctor who is based in Australia. He's a GP, he's tested with his clients, and it was astounding to see the majority of his clients were vitamin D deficient. He had a very, very effective sun care campaign there. So that was quite interesting. But vitamin D together with vitamin A will govern or guide a lot of skincare processes like proliferation, differentiation, apoptosis, and these sorts of things. Both of those work on those genes. And so the interesting thing is you legally may not have vitamin D in a topical cosmetic. So if you aren't getting it from healthy sun exposure, then the only other way you could have it is through your diet or through oral supplementation. But so anyway, so you want a good dose of vitamin A, vitamin D, and you want a broad spectrum of antioxidants, which you already touched on, for your free radical damage. You want to be protecting the lipid bilayers for the integrity of the skin, so that you don't have all the moisture leaving your skin. So you want to eat essential fatty acids. They call it essential because you don't make them yourself. You got to eat them. So those are your omegas that we discussed. And so that forms the kind of core or basis of an oral skincare supplementation program. And then you can lay on top of that if you've got specific concerns. So if you've got specific concerns with regards to problem skin, or very dry skin, or skin blemishes, or aging, or whatever the case is, there are products that we produce that are specifically suited to those concerns. They've been tested against those concerns. They've delivered efficacy, and so on and so forth. So it's a two-part process, I guess. So you've got your basics, and you must have your basics because you've got to make healthy skin for starters, and then you lay on top anything else that would address your particular concern.
Absolutely. Sounds like such a comprehensive routine, but I love that you've not just stuck with one ingredient or one vitamin. You've really ticked off all of the boxes, like having a skincare routine. You can't just have antioxidants. You've got to have your vitamin A. You've got to have your vitamin D as well. Speaking of success and all of the incredible things you've achieved, I'm wondering, what does 2021 look like for yourself and for Advanced Nutrition Program?
For the Advanced Nutrition Program, it's exciting because I have the benefit of looking at what our R&D pipeline looks like. We have recently welcomed Dr. Gaby Prinsloo onto our team, who are heading up our research program. And so it's, as I've said, as we've discussed, it's a very, very exciting time to be a therapist, because the sorts of tools that you've been armed with and in order to achieve results and build long-term sustainable relationships with your clients. I've never been so comprehensive, and I can see where that's going as well. So that's only going to serve to increase. We do need to be careful though from an environmental point of view though, where we go from here. Substantive real change is needed though, because I mean, you guys in Australia would have seen the wildfires that you've had recently, which is the interesting thing that we're seeing with climate change is that these places that are dry are becoming dry, and there's places that are wet are becoming wetter. I mean, we've had flooding the whole winter over here in the UK, and so change is needed on that front. So whilst I'm pretty optimistic as the business is exciting and everything else, I think there are going to be other bigger pictures, and people talk about COVID being a massive disruptor, and my kids will learn about these sorts of things in years to come at school. Yeah, they probably will, but I believe that more than anything, going into the next year and beyond, what we need to learn is adaptability, resilience, in order to face the sorts of changes that us as a society are going to be going through. So as a skincare professional, many of you will know, I mean, the whole shift away from the high street has been enormous. So retaining clients and working with your clients in a way that keeps them loyal to you, and not hunting all over the internet for your products is very, very important. And we believe there's one key way of doing that, and that is by supplying value at the point of purchase. And that's what keeps clients coming back to you. And so more than anything else, you have to deliver results. And in order to deliver results, you have to be the expert. So investment in education and the right sort of products to deliver the results that your clients want is what's going to keep clients loyal to you over the coming years. And having a certain amount of resilience and adaptability to changing business environments, changing environments generally, is absolutely key. And so yeah, that's the space that we're playing in. I think it's exciting, and it's within every difficult situation there are always opportunities, and that's we look forward to empowering our therapists and our distributors really to seize the moment and really thrive in those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like very exciting times ahead, and lots of positive and progressive change on the horizon for every level of our industry, which is very exciting.
Great. Thank you. It's been great to speak to you today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for spending the morning with me. I really, really appreciate it. It's been such an insightful conversation. I hope everybody leaves here thinking about how they can make changes, even such a small change in their business, and thinking about all the considerations that they're making on the impact, and also the way that they're impacting their clients' lives through nutrition. So thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you for the great work that you're doing. And I know, looking at your own website, one of the things that you look to achieve is exceeding client expectations. So hopefully, as a result of what we've been discussing today, that's something that the listeners will be able to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care.
How about that? I just love how much passion you can hear in David's voice as he talks about sustainability and preservation of the Earth's ecosystem. And the fact that he has taken that passion and embedded it into Advanced Nutrition Program as a company is a very impressive move. David and I continued our conversation into the evening for me and the early hours of the morning for him, talking all things sustainability and our industry and ways in which we can help, which you can read all about in our March issue of the Beauté Industry digital magazine, available on our website. For more information about Advanced Nutrition Program, visit them on the gram at advancednutritionprogram.au or over at Margie Fox Distributors. Us, of course, you'll find us at Beauté Industry and myself at Tamara Reid Beauté. Until next time, stay connected.